Okay, let me ask you this. How often do you actually evaluate how you think versus just, well, what you think? We generally assume our reasoning is pretty sound, right? But what if there was, like, a simple pocket-sized guide, something to help diagnose the flaws in our whole thought process? Today we're trying something a bit different. Discover a new, in-depth approach to book coverage with this extended summary. Now, unlike our previous review, which offered a more focused analysis, this feature delivers a really comprehensive overview. We're tracing the intellectual roots, the key arguments, and the real-world impact of this subject. We'd love to know if you appreciate this expanded format, if you find it helpful. So please let us know. Your feedback genuinely helps shape what we do next.
And that subject today is critical thinking itself, specifically how it's laid out in the Miniature Guide to Critical Thinking Concepts and Tools. It's by Richard Paul and Linda Elder. This book, it's quite a unique resource. It's nonfiction, definitely an educational handbook, and the style is very direct, concise, really instructional. It's built for quick reference, not really a sit-down-and-read narrative.
Right, and its mission seems pretty clear. To boil down these essential ideas for recognizing, analyzing, and really improving thinking habits. For anyone, really, students, teachers, professionals. It treats thinking almost like a skill, a measurable process, not just some innate talent you either have or don't.
Exactly. And the context for this couldn't be more relevant. I mean, the modern era absolutely demands rigorous critical thinking. We're just swimming in information, aren't we? And the ability to evaluate arguments, make sound decisions, scrutinize data properly, well, it's not a soft skill anymore. It's become a vital competency for being an informed citizen, for professional success.
Okay, before we really dig into the framework itself, just a quick note for you.
Yeah.
You are experiencing a unique two-host AI conversation. This is powered by Google's NotebookLM, and it's designed for deeper, more dynamic book summaries. So let's get into the mechanics then. Paul and Elder argue that basically all thinking, whether it's brilliant or, frankly, flawed, is made up of 8 fundamental elements, mandatory elements. These are the absolute building blocks. And the idea is if you can name them, you can diagnose them.
It's a very empowering concept, actually. They present these elements of thought almost like characters acting on a stage. Every single time you think something through, these 8 elements are involved, whether you're consciously aware of them or not.
Okay, let's break them down. Starting with the inputs, maybe. Every thought process kicks off with purpose, it's the goal, the reason for your thinking, and also a question at issue. You need to know what problem you're actually trying to solve.
Then you need the raw material, information. This is the data, the facts, the experiences you're relying on. But raw information on its own is pretty useless without interpretation and inference. That's the step where you draw conclusions from the data.
I think this next part is where things often get tangled for people, how we categorize and frame that information. That's concepts, right? The general ideas or theories we use to make sense of everything.
Yeah.
And that leads straight into number 6, which feels like a really big one. Assumptions.
Oh, assumptions are like the invisible engine driving your whole thought process. Absolutely. They are the beliefs you just take for granted, the unstated premises you accept as true, which then, consciously or not, steer you towards your final conclusion. And if your assumptions are shaky or just plain wrong, your entire argument can just collapse, even if the logic seems sound on the surface.
It's fascinating how the guide really forces you to shine a light on those hidden beliefs.
It absolutely does. That's one of its core strengths. The last 2 elements kind of wrap up the process, implications and consequences. So what follows if your reasoning holds up? You have to trace the logical outcomes of your thinking. And number 8 is your point of view, your specific perspective, your frame of reference. Everyone has one.
So this framework isn't just theoretical fluff. The book gives you a practical checklist for reasoning. It's a structured set of self-questions, really, designed to help you spot weaknesses using these 8 elements. So instead of just vaguely wondering, am I making sense here? You ask specific things like, can I state my purpose clearly? Or, wait, what assumptions am I making that I haven't even articulated?
That structure is absolutely vital. Think of it this way. If the elements of thought are the building blocks you use, then the universal intellectual standards are the non-negotiable quality control system. They're the filter that every argument, every single element of thought must pass through.
Right, that's where the rigor really comes in. It's not just enough to have a purpose. That purpose needs clarity. It's not enough to gather information. That information must be accurate and relevant.
Exactly. And the book teaches you how to actively use these standards, almost weaponize them in a good way. So if someone presents a complex solution but maybe oversimplifies the core issue, you can challenge it based on the standard of depth. Or if they're only presenting evidence that conveniently supports their conclusion, well, they fail on breadth and maybe even fairness.
That's a really powerful diagnostic tool then. You can pinpoint exactly where the thinking went off track.
And often that failure happens simply because we haven't trained ourselves to think in this structured, systematic way. The authors talk about developmental stages, the three levels of thought, which are, frankly, brutally honest about where most of us tend to operate.
Yeah, most of us probably start as the unreflective thinker. This is the intuitive, maybe impulsive person,
Oh.
operating mainly on gut instinct, personal bias. That they don't really see thinking as something they need to actively manage or improve. It just sort of happens.
The next step up is what they call a selectively reflective thinker. Now, this person is intelligent, they're capable, but they're inconsistent. They might apply critical thinking rigorously in their specific field, their job perhaps, but then let biases run rampant in other areas of their life. They only use it when it's convenient, maybe?
And the ultimate goal, then, is the highest order of thinking. This demonstrates habitual reflection. This person actively, consistently, and fairly applies these intellectual standards. It becomes a natural habit across all areas of life, not just sometimes. Okay, before we dive into what it actually takes to reach that highest level, just a quick reminder. You can find more discussions like this one over on our YouTube channel. Do check out Mindful Moments. That's our channel offering AI book analysis, summaries, critiques, all aimed at inspiring reflection and rational thought.
So, to climb those developmental stages, you need more than just checklists and frameworks. You need the right character traits. The book outlines these essential intellectual traits. Think of them as the necessary mindset, the required actors for becoming a strong critical thinker. They're described as habits, really, not just optional extras.
That really shifts the focus, doesn't it? From pure skills to something more like intellectual integrity. It starts with intellectual humility.
Yeah.
That's the willingness to genuinely acknowledge the limits of your own knowledge. To be able to say, hang on, I might be fundamentally wrong here. I need to actively look for opposing data.
That trait is so crucial because it enables others, like intellectual perseverance. That's the capacity to stick with difficult, complex, maybe frustrating problems and resist jumping to easy answers. It also supports intellectual empathy, which is a real mental discipline. It's about genuinely trying to reconstruct opposing viewpoints accurately, not just attacking a simplified straw man version.
And tying it all together, you have intellectual integrity and fair-mindedness. Integrity means holding yourself to the exact same demanding standards you apply to others. So if you demand clarity from someone else's argument, you absolutely must demand it from your own. No double standards.
Right. And if those traits represent the solution or the ideal, then the barriers to critical thought are like these psychological anchors holding us back. The guide details two really foundational culprits that often prevent us from ever reaching that highest level of thinking.
And those culprits are egocentrism and sociocentrism. Egocentrism is basically personal bias, right? Seeing the world solely through the lens of your own immediate desires, feelings, or, frankly, your vested interests.
And that egocentrism feeds directly into sociocentrism, or groupthink, essentially. It's that unquestioning loyalty to the views and beliefs of whatever groups you belong to. It could be your professional group, your political party, your social circle. And this loyalty often leads to just blatant violations of the standard of fairness. You apply the intellectual standards rigorously to outsiders, maybe your opponents, but you give your own in-group a total pass.
So the book is essentially trying to give you the tools to break free from both your personal echo chamber and your wider social bubble. It doesn't just define these biases, it aims to equip you, the reader, to actively recognize and counteract them.
And the practical application is really key here. The guide isn't just theory, it's packed with tools for action, templates, checklists, things like stepwise problem-solving guides. These templates actually integrate the elements of thought and the intellectual standards into a practical, usable process. You analyze a problem, identify the core questions, explicitly check your assumptions against those standards, and then move towards a justifiable resolution.
The power of that kind of structured approach is probably why it's become such a foundational resource in so many different fields. The final sections of the guide really elevate the discussion, almost to a civic level. They imagine what institutions, academic, business, even whole communities might look like if they genuinely committed to upholding critical thinking standards across the board. It's almost like a blueprint for developing critical societies, not just critical individuals.
So, to summarize the book's immense value, particularly for you, the learner, it offers something beyond abstract theory. It gives them a logical, linear structure. It's a coherent, truly actionable framework for diagnosing and then elevating the quality of pretty much every decision you make. It connects your raw thought elements, the intellectual standards for measurement, and those essential character traits we talked about.
Okay, Let's leave you with a final provocative thought to mull over. If all our thinking is inevitably driven by assumptions and defined by a specific point of view, how much of what you considered undisputed fact yesterday actually needs to be filtered through those universal intellectual standards right now? Click the link you see on screen for the in-depth book critique. And please subscribe, share, maybe purchase the book via the link if you're interested, and above all, think rationally.